In 1985, the Church of Reconciliation, which lay directly on the border between the eastern and western parts of the city of Berlin, was destroyed by the East German authorities. After German reunification in 1990, the church's congregation decided to build a new structure on the same site, a church that was modern, but constructed in the spirit of its predecessor.
We wanted to use as much of what was left of the old church as we could. First of all, we knew that the bells still existed. They were removed before the building was destroyed, so we started with those, and that brought about an enormous change in this part of the city, along what had been known as the Death Strip, the fact that these three bells suddenly appeared there.
The new Chapel of Reconciliation was officially consecrated in the year 2000. 2 years earlier, the St. Canisius Church in western Berlin was consecrated. And this is the model for the St. Trinitatis, or Church of the Holy Trinity, in Leipzig. Construction is set to begin this year. Modern sacred buildings such as these are designed to reflect contemporary religious faith. Leipzig, May 1st, 2011. A First Communion service at the Provost's Church of the Holy Trinity. The number of children who take part has increased every year. In 2010, it was 46. More are expected next year. The church's congregation is growing stronger. Its membership has doubled since German reunification. The situation was very different during the decades of communist control in East Germany. For 30 years, the government had refused permission for construction of a new church. They finally relented in 1978. But after construction, technical problems became apparent.
The building ground is very unstable. The entire complex is just too heavy. Enormous cracks have developed. That means we won't be able to use this building over the long term. The repair work would have been prohibitively expensive. So with these construction problems in mind, a decision was made to build a new church.
The East German authorities decreed that those churches allowed to be built must be as inconspicuous as possible. But that's not what the congregation has in mind for its new church.
It's essential that the architecture reflect the 21st century. In short, it should be a modern church. And it should also help to address an issue of particular concern in Eastern Germany. We live in a city where 80% of the population has no official religious affiliation. This church was designed to be a place of worship for Catholics, but it should also welcome non-believers, people who might be curious about religion, but who also may tend to shy away from churches.
This is where the church will be built, in central Leipzig. Construction is set to begin this summer. It will be the largest church construction project in a major German city since reunification. An elliptical design, walls of clay, a chapel built on the former Death Strip.
We wanted to pay tribute to something that's very important to us, the profound experience of a congregation that, just a few years before we were allowed to resume our religious activities, had seen the absolute worst. Our church being destroyed as the final act of the construction of the Berlin Wall. So when that wall came down, it was an event of enormous importance for us. And we came to the conclusion that we could not express the impact of that event simply by putting up a huge building. No building could be that big. Size does not necessarily convey significance. One can also convey significance in a smaller structure.
Eine Bedeutung geben oder eine Bedeutung in einem Gebäude ausdrücken, was klein ist.
The chapel now stands on what used to be the central part of the old church. The altar is off to the right, against the east wall. A dark wood carving has been placed in a well-lit niche. This is a relic from the altar of the old Church of Reconciliation. Christ and his apostles. Here you can see the remains of the old church's cellar, which was closed off in 1961.
We can't ignore history. The fact that a church was destroyed here. We can't reconstruct that church, so we came up with the idea of a fundamental transformation. We wanted to use everything that was left from the old church, for example, the bells or parts of the altar. We wanted to use them, but in a new way. The most striking example are the rammed earth walls, consisting of soil and other materials. But mixed into that soil were fragments of brick from the old church. So the overall concept was to transform materials that had been preserved from the original structure.
The Berlin Wall divided not only a city. Here it also divided the congregation of the Church of Reconciliation. After the wall came down, a memorial was set up on part of the ruins, and the church grounds were returned to the congregation. Today, this chapel is not only the new center of the local parish, it also serves as a historical reminder of the reconciliation between East and West. The chapel was officially consecrated on November 9th, 2000, the 11th anniversary of the fall of the wall.
It's a very modest chapel. There's no heating, even though we hold services here in the winter. It's a no-frills church building. There are no toilets, no heating, no elevators, nothing. And in our poverty, we're following in the footsteps of St. Francis of Assisi. So there's something Franciscan about it. And considering the history associated with this site, there's something ecumenical about it too.
And
that location, on the former death strip, marking the boundary between East and West, conveys the message that the future lies in reconciliation. The main entrance of St. Canisius. The doors are 11 meters tall, made of larch wood.
For me, this room imparts a sense of clarity, brightness, and transparency. All that in turn creates a sense of breadth and freedom. These are concepts that relate to religious faith, and that means that the individual is taken into a larger entity. You feel that here as soon as you walk in. The basic structure of this building is remarkable. It consists of two cubes that stand side by side. One is open and the other is closed. This open space represents to me the outside world, and the closed space represents an area in which I can withdraw from that world. This concept is also reflected in the external structures, two cubes that are connected to each other.
St. Canisius Catholic Church stands in the middle-class Berlin district of Charlottenburg, several kilometers west of where the wall used to run. In divided Berlin, St. Canisius was a central place of worship for the city's Catholics. The original structure was destroyed by a fire in 1995. Construction of the new church began in 2000. It's a sparsely appointed modern structure that breaks with some points of traditional church architecture. The church is alive with natural light. Subtle shadows play out along the walls. It's a massive concrete structure that conveys a powerful sense of serenity.
When you walk into this church, you look for the typical reference points. For example, where are the fonts of holy water, the sanctuary lamp, the images of saints? But in this church, you notice that there are no images. This church compels you to focus on yourself and to reconnect with your spiritual center. It's definitely minimalist, but that minimalism is significant. That is to say, you're more likely to find yourself not in a quantitative environment, but in a place where you can focus on your individuality. When you come to understand your individuality, you acquire spiritual depth, and this church is conducive to meditation, contemplation, and collecting one's thoughts.
Construction of the new St. Trinitatis Church in central Leipzig is still in the planning stages. Before work can begin, the congregation will have to come up with a share of the construction costs, 15 million euros. They still have a ways to go.
The greater part of the funding will come from the diocese. We'll also receive financial support from the Federal Environment Foundation. There's also been a nationwide fund drive. It was sensational. I don't think there had been anything like it in decades. They took up collections at Sunday Mass across the whole country for the construction of a new church, our church. I think they raised more than 2 million euros in 2009. Right now, we're trying to raise 4 to 5 million more.
The St. Trinitatis congregation has about 4,000 members. Most of them are young. The average age is 36. And many of them are getting involved with their new church. These pictures are from a fundraising event held 2 years ago at the construction site in the heart of Leipzig.
There was an appeal to the congregation to help finance the construction of the church, to make it happen. We all went down to the site where the church was to be built. It was a wonderful morning, and we had a lot of fun. There were drinks and food, and we rallied around, posed for photographs, and really enjoyed ourselves. Everybody was there.
But these construction projects are expensive, and despite the fact that members of the congregation are willing to help with donations, they can't finance it on their own. The Boniface Association, a Catholic aid organization, often provides financial support for these kinds of projects. The association promotes the construction of churches and community centers in parts of Germany and elsewhere in Europe where Catholics are in the minority.
It's important for us to support this particular project in Leipzig. It's a vital and cosmopolitan city, and the congregation there is young and it's growing. But it's only 3 to 4% of the city's population. We believe it's important for the church to have a presence in the heart of the city, a place that the local residents would find inviting, and would also serve as a landmark of the Catholic Church. The Boniface Association considers this an important project, and we want to support it. And of course, we see it as an opportunity to develop the congregation there.
Christians in Eastern Germany are a definite minority. In Leipzig, only about 4% of the population have officially declared themselves to be Catholics, and about 16% say they are Protestants. That is part of the heritage of East Germany's communist government, which put pressure on people to disavow their religious beliefs. Even today, the number of people in the eastern states who say they belong to any religion remains low. But this situation may also present new opportunities for the church.
We've found that a large segment of the population have absolutely no concept of God, Jesus Christ, or religion in general. But it's mostly the older generations that have turned away from religion. So nowadays, there's new generational territory to be explored. And it can be done without much interference, aside from the media reports about some errors that the church has made. So when you start telling them about God and Jesus Christ, people are interested, because it's completely unknown to them.
The design for the new St. Canisius Church came from an architect who grew up Catholic, Heike Büttner.
People think a church is a place to pray, but it's so much more than that. It's also a place to gather and meet people. It's a place of love and of peace and quiet.
What exactly is a sacred building? It's a place where the congregation gathers. It's a place to speak to God, and a place to be comfortable with yourself. A place of refuge.
The interior is marked by a very unusual flooring design. We used cobblestones. It's called the agora, a place where people meet, a marketplace in the traditional sense. It's an outside concept that we used inside.
This combination of interior and exterior elements is a key feature of the structure's design. The altar has been broken in two. Part of it remains inside the church, and the other part stands outside. Another example of this combination is the wooden outbuilding. Inside, there's a small, intimate chapel. It's a place where people can be alone with their thoughts.
We had Mary's chapel built out of wood, a reference to Noah's Ark or to the stable in Bethlehem. We made this reference intentionally because wood is a very warm material. You can smell it and feel it. It radiates warmth and security. The small apertures in the chapel walls are decorative, but only insofar as they provide a source of light. They induce a sense of calm and have the same sort of effect as light pouring in through gaps in the wooden planks of a barn or stable.
The design of church buildings has changed over the centuries. They reflect the faith of their time. The St. Canisius Church has won several prizes for its unique architecture, but some members of the congregation haven't quite got used to it yet.
This sort of thing can divide a congregation because not everyone is able to find a proper sense of piety here. People come from different traditions, and they're often intimidated at first by things that are modern. I believe that people have to have a sense of wonder, and that this, and the ability to be surprised, is something you should never lose. I believe that a good architect or a good artist is able to portray the world in a different dimension, and that creates the element of surprise. That element of surprise represents not only the origin of philosophy, but also the origin of religion. And when you combine that sense of the unexpected, a sense of amazement, and also the aesthetic aspects of this structure, I believe that religion also contains an element of beauty.
The original concept for the Chapel of Reconciliation was to create a simple place of worship on the former east-west border.
At first, the idea was to create a practical space, not a proper church. The bells would ring, and we could go there to pray. And then as time went by, people came to the conclusion that we actually did need a new building, one that was secure, where people would find peace of mind. In short, a place for reflection.
The plan called for an oval-shaped chapel, but funding was in short supply. Architects Rudolf Reitermann and Peter Sassenroth limited their design to the essentials: 4 walls, a roof, a basic liturgical structure. There were disagreements about what construction materials should be used.
The idea was to build a modern concrete and glass church. But the congregation was deeply offended by the thought of using concrete, because that's what was used to build the wall. And then they came up with the idea of using a material that was close to that used in the original structure: brick, which is just baked clay.
An Austrian company was brought in to build a chapel out of rammed earth. The walls were to be 7 meters high and half a meter thick. This sort of construction technology hadn't been used in Germany for the last 100 years. To keep costs down, volunteers helped out with the construction work. They came from all over Europe.
As we started to dig out a space for the foundation, we discovered some of the stone remains of the old church. We realized that this material could be mixed into the construction materials, and that would not only give the new walls a symbolic character, it would also make the mixture more stable. It was exactly the right choice, and these sorts of coincidental innovations were used in the construction of the chapel right from the start.
The chapel is surrounded by a colonnade and a curtain of vertical louvers made of Canadian Douglas fir. It's a modern structure, but it has none of the emotionalism that's sometimes associated with new buildings.
I've been the pastor here since 1975. I saw the wall in front of me every day. People were shot and killed here. That's part of the history of this site. But I think the healing process has begun here. Some say that soil can heal. I don't think you can just spread dirt somewhere and the healing will begin. But here I do believe that the soil can have a healing effect on the physical and psychological wounds that this city has suffered. We've experienced that right here, and I've experienced it myself as well.
For many architects, designing a church is a dream job, but it's also a demanding one. The Leipzig firm of Schulz & Schulz was awarded the contract to design the new St. Trinitatis Church. The plans include a congregation center, a square, and a church tower that's 50 meters tall. The new church will seat 600. One of the most impressive features is a giant glass window that looks out onto the city.
I'm quite happy with the design. It successfully creates aesthetic tension, a structure that is both visually striking and blends in with the surrounding area. That's a difficult balancing act, and I think the design succeeds quite well. It grabs your attention. A lot of people who see a modern structure like this believe that it reflects contemporary society. That's what our congregation was trying to achieve by choosing a new design in a new location. It's an expression of faith that's been carved in stone, so to speak.
In Stein gehauene Verkündigung des Glaubens.
The new church is scheduled to be completed in 2 years. The congregation will be able to celebrate Christmas 2013 in their new home. And while some churches in Germany are closing for a variety of reasons, the people of Leipzig are building a new one. In the end, it will all come down to whether the congregation can raise the money needed to complete the project. They believe they can, with God's help.
Once again, we'll have a place in the city center, just like it was with the old church before it was destroyed. We think that's great. We believe that the construction of this church and the fact that our congregation is growing are signs that the Christian way of life, the Catholic way of life, has a future in the city, and we want to build on that.